The phone didn't ring. It buzzed, a short, violent vibration against the granite countertop that sounded like a warning shot. I was chopping basil, the sharp, fresh scent filling my small kitchen, a smell that usually grounded me. But that sound, it made the knife freeze in my hand. My life in this city was quiet. It was curated. I had built walls of silence and routine so high that nothing from the past could scale them. Or so I thought. I wiped my hands on a towel and stared at the screen. The number wasn't saved, but the digits burned into my retinas instantly. I knew them. I had dialed them 1,000 times in a life that felt like it belonged to a stranger. Liora. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 7 years. It had been 7 years since I looked into my sister's eyes, 7 years since the ground beneath me had dissolved into ash. I shouldn't answer. I should block the number. I should go back to chopping basil and pretending that I didn't have a sister, or a past, or a scar that ran so deep it felt like it split my soul in two. But then the text bubble popped up. I'm at St. Jude's. Room 402. Please, Mara. I have no one else. The knife clattered onto the cutting board. No one else? That was a lie. She had Daniel. She had the world. She had the empire they built on the ruins of my happiness. But the desperation in those few words hooked into my chest and pulled. It wasn't forgiveness that made me grab my keys. It was curiosity. It was a dark, twisted need to see if the karma I had silently prayed for had finally arrived. I drove through the rain, the windshield wipers slicing back and forth like a metronome. Left, right, past, present. With every rhythmic swipe, the city lights blurred, and the tightly wound control I maintained over my memories began to unravel. The smell of wet asphalt wasn't the smell of the highway anymore. It was the scent of the garden behind our old house, the night the air was thick with humidity and promise. The drive became a tunnel, pulling me backward, stripping away the years until I wasn't the woman in the sedan anymore. I was the girl in the sundress, sitting across from Daniel. It was a Tuesday. Just a regular, mundane Tuesday 7 years ago. Daniel had come over for dinner, his tie loosened, that boyish grin plastered on his face that made him look less like a rising tech mogul and more like the college student I had fallen in love with. We were happy. God, we were so nauseatingly happy. The kind of happy that makes you think you're untouchable. I remembered the way he looked at me across the table, his hand covering mine, his thumb tracing the veins in my wrist. Mara, I don't want to wait anymore. The company is taking off. Things are going to get crazy, but I need one thing to be absolute. I need you to be my wife. I could still feel the phantom weight of the diamond he slid onto my finger. It wasn't ostentatious, not yet. It was elegant. Pure. Just like us. We spent that night talking about the future until the sun bled through the curtains. We talked about a small house, about kids running in the yard, about growing old. And then, the memory shifted, darkening as Liora walked into the frame. I can see her clearly in my mind's eye, leaning against the doorframe of my apartment the next morning, holding 2 coffees. She was beautiful, she always was. Where I was soft edges and quiet tones, Liora was sharp angles and vibrant colors. She was the fire to my water. Let me see it. She had squealed, grabbing my hand. I watched her face as she examined the ring. For a split second, a fraction of a moment so fast I thought I imagined it, her smile faltered. Her eyes didn't crinkle at the edges. They went flat. Cold. A shark swimming beneath the surface. But then the mask snapped back into place. It's stunning, Mara. Really. I didn't think Daniel had such classic taste. I thought he'd go for something bigger, considering the valuation rumors. That was the first prick. The first tiny drop of poison. She made it sound like a compliment, but the undercurrent was there. He has money now. Why didn't he buy you something better? I brushed it off. I was too high on love to notice the cliff I was walking toward. Over the next few months, everything accelerated. Daniel's company, Nexus, hit a breakthrough with their AI integration. Suddenly, he wasn't just my fiancé, he was Daniel Sterling, the man on the cover of Forbes. The phone calls started coming at all hours. Lawyers. Investors. Reporters. I tried to keep up. I really did. I organized the dinners, I smiled for the cameras when they ambushed us at restaurants. I played the part of the supportive partner. But I was drowning. The world was getting too loud. And Liora? Liora was the life raft. Or so she pretended to be. I remember one afternoon vividly, the memory playing out against the rain-slicked windshield of my car. I was overwhelmed with wedding swatches, trying to decide between ivory and cream, when Daniel called to cancel our lunch date for the third time that week. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by fabric, tears stinging my eyes. Liora came over. She didn't hug me. She started organizing the swatches. "Mara, look, you have to understand," she said, her voice smooth, pragmatic. "Men like Daniel, they operate on a different frequency. He's building an empire. You can't expect him to care about napkins." "It's not the napkins, Liora. It's that I haven't seen him in 3 days." She looked at me then, a pitying glance that made me feel small. "Maybe you're suffocating him, Mara. Daniel needs space to conquer the world. If you cling too tight, he's going to run." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Is that what I was doing? Was I the anchor dragging him down? "I'll talk to him," she offered, patting my hand. "I'm meeting him later anyway to drop off those contracts Dad wanted him to look at. I'll smooth it over. You just relax. You look tired." I let her go. I let her walk out the door and straight to him. I was so grateful. I thought I had the best sister in the world. I didn't know that every time she went to him, she wasn't smoothing things over. She was lighting matches. The change in Daniel was subtle at first. He became shorter with me. Distant. When I asked about his day, he'd give one-word answers. When I tried to touch him, he'd flinch just slightly, as if my skin was too hot or too cold. "What's wrong?" I asked him one night, standing in the kitchen of the penthouse he had just bought, a place that felt more like a museum than a home. "Nothing, Mara. I'm just tired. The merger is stressful." But it wasn't just stress. I could feel him pulling away, drifting out to sea where I couldn't follow. Meanwhile, Liora was glowing. She was around constantly. She started dressing differently, sharper, more expensive. She knew details about Daniel's schedule that I didn't. "Oh, he didn't tell you?" Liora asked one evening while we were looking at floral arrangements. "He's flying to Tokyo on Thursday." "Tokyo?" "He told me he was going to be in the office." She covered her mouth, feigning shock. "Oops. Maybe he didn't want you to worry. You know how anxious you get about his travel." "Anxious?" I wasn't anxious. I was supportive. Who told him I was anxious? The seeds of doubt were taking root, winding their vines around my throat. I started to feel like the outsider in my own relationship. Liora and Daniel would joke about business terms I didn't understand. They would share glances, inside jokes, that excluded me. Then came the month before the wedding. The invitations were sent. The dress was hanging in my closet, a ghost of white silk waiting for a body. Daniel missed our tasting appointment. I sat at the bakery for 2 hours, watching the clock tick, eating samples of vanilla sponge cake until I felt sick. When I finally got hold of him, his voice was ice. "I can't do this right now, Mara. I have the SEC breathing down my neck and you're bothering me about cake?" "Bothering you?" I whispered, the phone trembling against my ear. "It's our wedding, Daniel. Priorities, Mara. Get some." The line went dead. I sat there, the silence of the bakery deafening, realizing that the man I loved was turning into a stranger. And who was there to pick up the pieces? Liora. She picked me up. She drove me home. "He's just under pressure," she soothed. "Driving his car." Why was she driving his car? I ignored the question. "He loves you. But maybe he's realizing that you two are different." "Different how?" "Well, look at him. He's a shark. And you're a goldfish, Mara. You're sweet. But maybe he needs someone who can swim in the deep end." I should have slapped her. I should have screamed. But I was so beaten down, so convinced that I was failing him, that I just nodded. I let her words seep into my bloodstream. The betrayal didn't happen in a single explosion. It was a slow suffocation. 2 weeks before the wedding. That was when the silence truly fell. Daniel stopped coming home. He stayed at the office, or so he said. My calls went to voicemail. My texts remained on read. I went to his office. The receptionist, a woman who used to smile at me, looked down at her desk. "Mr. Sterling is in a meeting. He said he's not to be disturbed. But I'm his fiancé. I'm sorry, Mississippi." He was very specific. I stood in the lobby of the building that was supposed to be our future, feeling the marble floor suck the heat out of my body. I called Liora. "Where is he?" I pleaded. "Is he with you?" Liora's voice was strange, breathless. "Mara, stop acting crazy. You're embarrassing him. Go home. Wait for him to call. You're pushing him away." I went home. I waited. 1 day passed. 2. 3. The apartment was a tomb. The wedding dress hanging on the door looked less like a promise and more like a shroud. I barely ate. I barely slept. I paced the floor, clutching my phone, praying for a sign, an explanation, anything. Then the notification came. It wasn't a text from Daniel. It wasn't a call. It was a Google alert I had set up for his name years ago. Tech tycoon Daniel Sterling weds in secret ceremony in Capri. I remember staring at the words. They didn't make sense. It was a mistake. Tabloids lie. They always lie. I laughed, a dry, brittle sound that cracked in the empty room. We were getting married in 2 weeks. In Chicago. Not Capri. My fingers shook as I clicked the link. The page loaded agonizingly slow. And then, there was the photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance with a long lens. But there was no mistaking him. Daniel. Standing on a cliffside terrace overlooking the ocean. He was wearing a white tuxedo. And standing next to him, holding a bouquet of white roses, looking up at him with a look of triumphant adoration, was Liora. My sister. The world didn't go black. I wish it had. Instead, everything became hyperreal. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a jet engine. The light coming through the window was blinding. I couldn't breathe. My lungs had turned to stone. I vomited. Right there on the expensive Persian rug. I dry heaved until my ribs ached, gasping for air that refused to enter my body. Married? They were married? How? When? I grabbed my phone and dialed Liora. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed Daniel. Straight to voicemail. I called my mother. "Mom," I screamed when she picked up. "Mom, tell me it's not true." "Mara," her voice was small. Broken. We just found out. Liora called this morning. She said they're in love. She said you and Daniel broke up weeks ago." "We didn't break up," I screamed, tearing at my hair. "He ghosted me." "Mom, she stole him." "Mara, calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down." I threw the phone against the wall. It shattered, glass and plastic exploding across the floor. I sank to my knees, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. The betrayal wasn't just the man. Men leave. It happens. It was her. My blood. The person who shared my room growing up. The person who whispered secrets with me in the dark. She had looked me in the eye, held my hand, and all the while she was carving my heart out with a smile. I didn't pack. I didn't take the dress. I didn't take the ring. I left it on the counter, a sparkling accusation. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and I walked out. I drove until the gas light came on. Then I filled up and drove again. I didn't stop until I was 3 states away. I changed my number. I deleted my social media. I became a ghost. The flash of a siren behind me snapped me back to the present. I jerked the steering wheel, realizing I had drifted into the other lane. The hospital was ahead, looming like a fortress in the downpour. My knuckles were white on the wheel. The engine ticked as it cooled, a countdown to the confrontation I had spent nearly a decade avoiding. Why was I here? Was it closure? Or was it revenge? I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the girl who fled in tears. This woman had steel in her spine. Her eyes were hard. I stepped out into the rain, letting it soak my coat. I walked through the sliding glass doors of St. Jude's, the smell of antiseptic and old coffee hitting me like a physical blow. Room 402. The elevator ride was an eternity. Every ding of the passing floors felt like a heartbeat skipping. Ding. Floor 2. Ding. Floor 3. Ding. Floor 4. The doors slid open. The hallway was quiet, dim. I walked past nurses speaking in hushed tones, past rooms where televisions flickered with mindless entertainment. I reached room 402. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The room was shadowed, lit only by the monitors and the glow of the city outside the window. And there she was. Liora. She was sitting in a chair by the window, not in the bed. She looked small. The vibrant, sharp-angled woman from my memories was gone. In her place was someone frail. Her hair, once glossy and perfectly styled, hung limp around her face. She was wearing a designer coat, but it hung on her frame like it was 2 sizes too big. She turned when she heard the door. When our eyes met, the air left the room. "Mara?" she whispered. Her voice was cracked. I didn't move from the doorway. I stayed in the hall light, refusing to step into her darkness. "I'm here," I said, my voice flat. No emotion. No anger. Just cold, hard fact. She tried to smile, but it looked painful. "You came. I didn't think you would. You said you had no one else," I replied. "Which is a lie, Liora. You have a husband. You have a family. You have the millions you were so desperate for." She flinched. The words hit her, and I saw her physically recoil. She looked down at her hands that were trembling. "I don't," she said softly. "I don't have any of that, Mara. Not anymore." "What do you mean?" She looked up, and in the harsh light of the hospital room, I saw the bruise. It was faint, covered with expensive makeup, but I saw it. A yellowing shadow on her cheekbone. I stepped closer, instinct overriding my hatred. "What happened to your face?" She touched the spot, wincing. "It's not what you think. Daniel didn't hit me. He's never hit me. But he's not here, Mara. He hasn't been here for months." "Where is he?" I asked, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. She let out a dry, rattling laugh. "Europe. Asia. Who knows? He lives on a jet. He lives in hotels. He sends money. He sends gifts. But he doesn't send himself." "So you're lonely," I said, crossing my arms. "Is that why you called? To cry about the lonely life you stole from me? Because I have to tell you, Liora, my sympathy tank is running on empty." "No," she shook her head violently. "It's not that. It's, everything is falling apart. The company. The SEC. They're investigating him, Mara. Fraud. Embezzlement. He's going to lose it all. And if he goes down, he's taking me with him." I signed papers. I didn't read them. I just signed whatever he put in front of me because I wanted him to love me. I stared at her. The mighty Liora, the manipulator, reduced to a trembling signature on a fraudulent contract. "You want me to help you with legal fees? Is that it?" "No." She stood up, swaying slightly. "I want you to know the truth. Before it all burns down. I can't carry it anymore. It's eating me alive." "The truth?" I scoffed. "I know the truth. You slept with my fiancé. You married him behind my back. End of story." "That's not the whole story," she whispered. Tears began to spill down her cheeks, ruining the makeup, revealing the exhaustion underneath. "You think he fell in love with me? You think he chose me?" She took a step toward me, her eyes wild. "He didn't choose me, Mara. I forced him." The room went silent. The monitor beeped, a steady, rhythmic pulse. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I trapped him," she confessed, the words spilling out like vomit. "That month before the wedding? When he was stressed. I told him you were cheating on him." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You what?" "I created fake messages," she continued, sobbing now. "I hired a guy, a developer, to spoof texts from your number. I made it look like you were seeing his competitor. I made it look like you were only marrying him for the shares. I showed him the proof the night he missed the tasting." I couldn't breathe. My hands curled into fists so tight my nails cut into my palms. "He didn't believe it at first," she cried. "But I kept feeding it to him. I told him you laughed about him behind his back. I told him you called him a cash cow. And then, one night, when he was drunk and heartbroken, I was there. I took a step back, revulsion rising in my throat like bile. He didn't marry me because he loved me," she gasped. "He married me because I told him I was pregnant." "Pregnant?" I looked at her stomach. It was flat. I wasn't, she whispered. I lied. I faked the test. By the time he found out the truth, we were already married. The scandal of a divorce would have ruined the IPO. He was stuck. She fell back into the chair, covering her face with her hands. He's hated me every single day for 7 years, Mara. Every single day. He looks at me with dead eyes. We sleep in separate rooms. He never touches me. It's been hell. I have the money. I have the clothes. But I am in hell. I stood there, processing the magnitude of the horror. It wasn't just a betrayal of passion. It was a calculated, cold-blooded demolition of 2 lives. She hadn't just stolen him, she had destroyed him to possess him. And you think telling me this fixes it? I asked, my voice trembling with a rage so hot it felt cold. You think confession absolves you? No, she wept. I wanted you to know that you won. You think you lost, but you won. You got out. You're free. I'm the prisoner. I looked at her, this broken, pathetic creature. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her. But before I could speak, the door behind me opened. The air pressure in the room changed instantly. It became heavy. Charged. I turned around. Standing in the doorway, wearing a raincoat over a suit that looked like he had slept in it, was Daniel. He looked older. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes. His hair was graying at the temples. He looked exhausted, worn down to the bone. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes widened. He dropped the briefcase he was holding. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Mara? His voice was a ghost. A sound from a dead world. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him. The man I had loved. The man who had believed I was a monster. He looked from me to Liora, and then back to me. A flicker of something ignited in his eyes. Pain? Hope? Fear? What are you doing here? He asked, his voice rough. Liora called me, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Daniel looked at Liora with a look of pure loathing. A look so venomous it made me shiver. What did you tell her? He snarled at her. What poison are you spilling now? I told her the truth, Daniel. Liora screamed, standing up, her hysteria peaking. I told her everything. About the texts. About the fake pregnancy. Everything. Daniel froze. The color drained from his face. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, desperate, terrified. He took a step toward me, his hands reaching out. Mara, is that true? Did she tell you? I didn't move. I didn't step back, but I didn't step forward. She told me, I said. Daniel let out a sound, half sob, half laugh. He ran a hand through his wet hair, pacing a tight circle in the small room. 7 years, he muttered. 7 years I thought you played me. 7 years I thought you were the villain. He stopped and looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. I never stopped loving you, he whispered. Not for a second. Even when I hated you, I loved you. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and wet like the humidity of a storm that refuses to break. Even when I hated you, I loved you. It was the kind of line you hear in movies, the kind that swells with orchestral music and leads to a passionate embrace in the rain. But there was no music here. There was only the rhythmic beeping of Liora's heart monitor and the smell of stale antiseptic. I looked at Daniel. I really looked at him. I searched for the man I had planned to spend my life with, but all I found was a stranger wearing his face. He was vibrating with a frantic, desperate energy. He took another step toward me, his hand reaching out to graze my arm. Mara, please, he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. We can fix this. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. If I had known she was lying, if I had known you were waiting. He stopped, his eyes darting between me and Liora, who was curled in the chair, sobbing silently into her hands. I'll file the papers tomorrow, Daniel said, the words tumbling out of him faster now. I'll divorce her. I don't care about the company. I don't care about the scandal. Let the investors pull out. Let it all burn. I have enough money stashed away. We can go somewhere else. We can start over. He grabbed my hands then. His palms were damp, clammy. It's not too late, Mara. We missed 7 years, but we have the rest of our lives. Just say you forgive me. Just say we're okay. I stared down at our joined hands. His grip was tight, bordering on painful. He was holding on to me like I was a lifeline, like I was the only thing keeping him from drowning in the wreckage of his own life. And for a second, just a heartbreaking, treacherous second, I wanted to say yes. The old Mara, the girl who had sat on the floor crying over wedding swatches, wanted to fall into his arms and pretend the last 7 years were just a nightmare. But I wasn't that girl anymore. That girl had died the day she saw a photo of her fiancé marrying her sister on a cliff in Capri. I pulled my hands away. The loss of contact made him stumble forward slightly. He looked at me, confused, hurt. Mara? I stepped back, putting distance between us. I looked at Liora, who was watching us with red, swollen eyes. She looked terrified. She knew that if I said yes, she would be cast out into the cold, completely alone. And then I looked back at Daniel. You want to start over? I asked, my voice quiet but steady. You want to pretend none of this happened? Yes, he breathed, nodding eagerly. Yes. We can erase it. No, Daniel. We can't. The rejection hit him like a physical slap. He flinched. What do you mean? You heard her. It was all lies. She manipulated me. She trapped me. She did, I agreed, glancing at my sister. Liora lowered her head, unable to meet my gaze. She did terrible, unforgivable things. She stole my life because she was jealous and greedy. She played on your insecurities. She acted like a monster. I turned my eyes back to him, and I let the steel I had forged over 7 years of solitude shine through. But you let her. Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. You let her, Daniel, I repeated, my voice rising just enough to fill the room. You believed her. We were together for 3 years. 3 years of sleeping in the same bed, of sharing dreams, of building a life. And yet, it took a handful of text messages and a few whispers in your ear for you to believe I was a villain. That's not fair, he protested, his face flushing. She had proof. The text looked real. Did you call me? I asked, cutting him off. Did you come to me? Did you look me in the eye and ask me if it was true? No. You ghosted me. You shut me out. You let your ego get bruised, and instead of fighting for us, you folded. You married her a month later. I was hurt, he shouted, throwing his hands up. I was heartbroken. You were weak. I shouted back, the anger finally breaking through the calm surface. You were weak, Daniel. You let the first storm knock our house down. And now you want to rebuild it? On what foundation? You didn't trust me then. Why would I trust you now? The silence that followed was deafening. The truth of it settled over him, and I watched the hope drain out of his eyes. He slumped, his shoulders curving inward, the energy leaving his body. I made a mistake, he whispered. The biggest mistake of my life. Yes, you did, I said, feeling a profound sense of sadness. But mistakes have consequences. You chose to marry her. You chose to stay for 7 years. You chose the money, the image, the company. You chose safety over truth. I looked at Liora. She was trembling. And you, I said, addressing her for the first time since Daniel arrived. You wanted his life so badly. You wanted the money. You wanted the status. Well, you got it. Look at you. You're miserable. You're alone. You have a husband who loathes you and a fortune that feels like a cage. Was it worth it? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, she choked out. No. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sterile hospital air. It felt cleaner now. The weight on my chest, the weight I had carried since the day I left home, was lifting. I realized then that I hadn't come here for an apology. I hadn't come here to get him back. I had come here to see that I hadn't lost anything. The man I loved didn't exist. He was a fantasy. The real man was standing in front of me, a man who could be easily manipulated, a man who valued his pride over his partner. And the sister I missed? She didn't exist either. I'm leaving now, I said, buttoning my coat. Daniel took a step toward me. Mara, wait. Where are you going? Home, I said simply. To my life. A life that I built without your money, without your help, and without your drama. Please, he begged, tears spilling onto his cheeks. Don't leave me here with her. I can't do this anymore. Then leave, I said, shrugging. That's your choice. It always was. But don't follow me. I walked to the door. My hand touched the cold metal handle. I paused and looked back at them one last time. They were a tableau of misery. A wealthy man in a ruined suit and a beautiful woman in a hospital gown, both of them trapped in a prison of their own making. I forgive you, I said. They both looked up, shocked. I forgive you, I repeated. Not for you, but for me. Because I refuse to carry this bitterness for one more day. I refuse to let you two live rent-free in my head any longer. You have each other. And honestly, you deserve each other. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. Mara, Daniel called out, his voice cracking. I didn't turn back. I kept walking. My heels clicked against the linoleum floor, a steady, rhythmic sound that echoed through the quiet corridor. I walked past the nurse's station, past the elevator, and toward the exit. When the automatic doors slid open, the cool night air hit my face. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a sliver of the moon. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of wet earth and city exhaust. It was the sweetest thing I had ever smelled. I walked to my car, my steps light. I didn't feel lonely. I didn't feel broken. For the first time in 7 years, I felt whole. I had walked into the fire, faced the ghosts that haunted me, and walked out untouched. I got into my car and started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the hospital and the 2 broken people inside it behind me, I turned on the radio. A soft jazz melody filled the car. I smiled. I drove back toward my apartment, toward my basil plant on the counter, toward my quiet, peaceful, honest life. I had chosen myself. And that was the greatest love story I could have ever asked for. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you love to save yourself, you know exactly how heavy that first step is and how incredibly light the last one feels. Sometimes, the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. I made my choice, but I want to hear yours. If you were standing in that hospital room, would you have walked away like I did, or would you have stayed to rebuild? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you believe that choosing your own peace is the ultimate victory, hit that like button to show your support.